Good morning. So hope all of you are fine as usual. So we'll continue with the British empowerment in India. The first we will make Britishers climb and then British will go down till 1947. So right now we are busy in creating the British Empire, and till yesterday we have dealt with the capture of Bengal, Maratha, Punjab, Sindh, Mysore. So these are some of the powerful states had succumbed to the British policy. And we have seen the British policy of expansionism also, that in 100 years of the company's rule, how the British India turned into, the 60% of India turned into British India. So here, the main theme is that the colonialism. What is the purpose of India for the British is economic importance. So colonialism is a very important thing that British established here, colonialism. So when political control was utilized in exploitation of economy. So political control was utilized in exploitation of economy to benefit the mother country. To benefit the mother country, it is called colonialism. Political control was utilized to benefit the mother country, it is called colonialism. And here mother country is England. So political control was utilized in exploitation of economy to benefit the mother country. So this had started in 1757, and you understand that the relevance of India is mostly related to this. The relevance of India is mostly related to this. So Indian system very strongly rooted in terms of strong political control by the Mughal, but very soon this system was disturbed by the Britishers. So 1757 colonialism had started, the beginning of drain of wealth, and it lasted till 1947. It lasted till 1947. So this colonialism we will study here. So you can give the heading, the economic history of India. Give the big heading, economic history of India, and then economic history of India. So in school days you might have studied the word imperialism. You understand the meaning of imperialism, that means political control, and colonialism means economic exploitation after that. So imperialism and colonialism both have the same objective and same effect. If you do imperialism, it's only for colonialism. So whether you call Britain an imperial country, or whether you call Britain a colonial country, the meaning are same. So both imperialism and colonialism have the same objective and same effect. Both imperialism and colonialism have the same objective and same effect. So we can say that India became victim of British imperialism. We can say that India became victim of British imperialism. India became victim of British imperialism in order to serve the colonial interest of Britain. India became victim of British imperialism in order to serve the colonial interest of Britain. India became victim of British imperialism in order to serve the colonial interest of Britain. So this is how you understand the imperialism and colonialism. Without imperialism, colonialism not possible. And imperialism is only for the colonialism. So we can say that India became victim of British imperialism in order to serve the colonial interest of Britain. India became victim of British imperialism. So this statement you need to keep in record so that we can talk next time after explanation. So in this episode of Economic History of India, first thing we will study the impact of the British economic policies. Impact of British economic policies. Impact of British economic policies. So impact of British economic policies, we have drain of wealth. Drain of wealth. First thing we will discuss about the impact of the British economic policies. Let us talk about the syllabus first. So drain of wealth. This is a very important topic. Second, commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture. Third, destruction of handicraft industries. Handicraft industries. Growth of agriculture labor. And rural indebtedness. Rural indebtedness. So drain of wealth, commercialization of agriculture, destruction of handicraft industries, growth of agriculture labor and rural indebtedness. So growth of agricultural labor and rural indebtedness. So we have the 5 heads to study the impact of the British economic policies. But this growth of agricultural labor and rural indebtedness, growth of agricultural labor and rural indebtedness. This is basically, you can see, this is called development of underdevelopment. underdevelopment. Development of underdevelopment. Alp Vikas ka Vikas. So development of underdevelopment. So Alp Vikas ka Vikas. So development of underdevelopment means those were areas which underdeveloped already became more underdevelopment. So that is called development of underdevelopment. So one region is positive, that which underdeveloped area should be developed, and other region is highly negative, that is called development of underdevelopment. Growth of agricultural labor, rural indebtedness. So now take about the drain of wealth first. Drain of wealth. Drain of wealth refers to transfer of wealth and commodities from India to England. Transfer of wealth and commodities from India to England without any substantial return. Drain of wealth refers to transfer of wealth and commodities from India to England without any substantial return. Without any substantial return. Transfer of wealth and commodities from India to England without any substantial return. Drain theory was first given by Dadabhai Naoroji. Dadabhai Naoroji. Dadabhai Naoroji wrote a book in 1867, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Un-British, what do you understand? Means actually Dadabhai Naoroji said that here the British government is un-British government. He wanted that there is a system of governments in England. The similar system of governance should be here also. So this government is un-British government. Okay, so therefore he said this is a region of the poverty. So poverty and un-British rule in India. Secondly, England's debt to India. This was a journal published by him, England's Debt to India, in which he highlighted the drain theory. England's Debt to India. This is a journal which highlighted the drain theory. England's Journal to India, which highlighted the drain theory. Other than these works, we have the big works done by R.C. Dutt. R.C. Dutt, he wrote Economic History of India. This is the name of the book written by R.C. Dutt. Economic History of India. Name of the book written by R.C. Dutt. R.P. Dutt. He wrote India Today. This is also a book. India Today is a book of economy. So, Economic History of India, and R.P. Dutt, he wrote India Today. This is a book of economy. So, other than the works done by Dadabhai Naoroji, we have these works also, which explain the drain theory. It explains the drain theory. Economic History of India by R.C. Dutt, and R.P. Dutt, he wrote India Today. G. Subramaniam Iyer, he published The Hindu, the newspaper that you study. He was the editor of The Hindu. The newspaper that you read is the editor of The Hindu. And he also highlighted the drain theory. He also highlighted the drain theory. G. Subramaniam Iyer, India Today, and he also highlighted the drain theory. So, these are the names you have to remember, that they had done tremendous contribution in exposing the British exploitation from India to England. Tremendous contribution. So, drain of wealth. These are the sources that we talk about the drain of wealth. So, now come to the forms of the drain. What are the ways that there was a drain of wealth from India to England? Forms of drain. First is, that is called trade and commerce. Trade and commerce. Trade and commerce, this form of drain had started. This form of drain had started immediately after the Farman of 1717. This form of drain had started immediately after the Farman of 1717. 1717 Farman. That is free trading right. Free trading right. And it ultimately transformed into Plassey plunder. It ultimately transformed into Plassey plunder. it ultimately transformed into Plassey plunder. Trade and commerce. Second, gift and exchanges. Gift and exchanges. Precious metals were drained from India to England. Precious metals was drained from India to England. Most of the Raja Nawab of India, they donated gift to the British, gift to British officers. British servants, the servants of East India Company, transformed their precious wealth into precious metal. Transform their wealth into precious metal. Precious metal. And it was sent to England. It was sent to England. Transfer their wealth into precious metal, and it was sent to England. Third, home charges. Understand, this is a very important form of the drain. Home charges. Home charges, that is the most important form of the drain. Important form of drain. Home charges, that is salary and pension of British officers. British officers. Salary and pension of British officers. Second, expenditure of India House. India House was a ministry in England for India. Ministry in England for India. What is India House? It is a ministry for England, in Ministry of England in India. So expenditure of India House. That ministry was there in England, and this ministry was guiding India. So minister was from England, Officials in this ministry was from England, and then expenditure was coming from India. So expenditure of India House. Cost of military maintenance. Cost of military maintenance. Cost of army training. Weapons purchase. So cost of military maintenance, cost of army training, cost of weapons purchase. These are called the expenditure of India House. Cost of military maintenance, cost of army training, weapons purchased. These are called expenditure of India House. From India to England without any substantial return. This is the way that entire things was transferred. So home charges was the biggest form of the drain. Biggest form of drain. Cost of military maintenance, cost of army training, and weapons purchased. So this was the biggest form of drain. Fourth is fourth point, railways. Railway was as exploitative. When British introduced railways, the primary work of railway was to connect the source of raw material and then sent it to the port, and from port it was sent to England. So Indian raw material was draining from India to England, and even the finished product of England was sent to countryside. So finished product was England sent to the countryside, and then so this is how the railways actually created the atmosphere of exploitation. Created the atmosphere of exploitation. So railways, it exploited the source of raw material, and it was sent to England. Exploited the source of raw material and it was sent to England. And finished product of England was sent to village to village. Finished product of England was sent to village to village. Finished product of England was sent to village to village. This is the one form of the exploitation of railway. Now look at the another form, that railway was a private organization. Railway was private organization. Railway was a private organization and investment in railway was exclusive to British investors. Investment in railways was exclusive to British investors. Indians were not permitted to invest in railways. Indians were not permitted to invest in railways. So those who got opportunity to invest in railway they got guaranteed interest plus share in profit. They got guaranteed interest plus share in profit. Guaranteed interest plus share in profit. So that profit was draining to England. That profit was draining to England. That profit was draining to England. So investment was exclusive to British investors. So that post was running to England. So railways was also very exploitative. Then the exchange rate, try to understand this exchange rate between rupees and pound. Rupees and pound. So exchange rate was also put in such a way, means suppose you come from the 1 pound and you got 80 rupees, then you can purchase 8 pen. If exchange rate was put, then you will have national money to buy the goods. So exchange rate between rupees and pound. Exchange rate between rupees and pound. Rupees and pound. It was fixed in such a way that it promoted British export. It promoted British export. At the same time, it discouraged Indian export. It promoted British export. At the same time, it discouraged Indian export. So exchange rate was fixed in such a way that it promoted British export and it discouraged Indian export. So these are the factors that created the atmosphere which is called drain of wealth. Drain of wealth from India to England. So drain had a massive impact. Impact was impact of the drain, first point. Impact of the drain, first point. It created capital formation It created capital formation in England, which led to the industrialization of England. It created capital formation in England, which led to the industrialization of England. But it restricted capital formation in India. It restricted capital formation in India. So there was no industrialization and no urbanization. There was no industrialization and no urbanization. No industrialization and no urbanization. Impact. Transfer of precious metal had created problem of minting the currency. Hence, problem of minting the currency. Because there was no metal available to mint the currency. So transfer of precious metals had created problem of minting the currency. Therefore, British switch over to paper currency. So paper currency had started because there was no metal left. To mint the currency. Now come to the second point of the impact of the British economic policies. Yes, we have done with commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture. So commercialization yes, Cossack. What was the railway? Look, railway was a private organization. So all the investors were shareholders. So those who will invest in railway, they will become the shareholder. And the process was that investors, those who invested in railway, they were getting guaranteed interest. Suppose you invested in railway, 4% interest rate guaranteed, plus share in profit. So double profit. And only British was permitted to invest in railway. So this double profit would drain away to England. Beneficiary English. Indians were not permitted to invest in railway. Therefore, this double profit would not save in India. So this is called railways. How railways? So guaranteed interest plus share in profit. Next point is, that is commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture. The word looking very good, but it had a very disastrous impact on economy. Commercialization of agriculture. So what do you mean by commercialization? Commercialization refers to shift from food crops to cash crops. So earlier peasants were giving more focus on production of wheat, rice, other things. But in the 19th century, the peasants were more for cotton, jute, indigo, tea, opium, all these things. So cotton, jute, tea, indigo, opium, all these things started getting prominence immediately in the 19th century. But however, these crops were grown in India much before the advent of British rule. But earlier it was grown for local consumption, now it started growing for the market. So when you started doing cultivation for the market, we call it as a commercialization of agriculture. But earlier these crops were also grown and it was not in plenty but only for the self-use. So write the definition. Commercialization refers to shift from food crops to cash crops. Shift from food crops to cash crops. In 19th century, peasant gave more focus on production of cotton, jute, indigo, tea, opium, etc. However, these crops were grown in India much before the advent of British rule, but earlier it was grown for self-consumption, but in 19th century it started growing for market. 19th century it started growing for market. So this is called commercialization of agriculture. If you look at data, what is this data? 1800 to 1860, look at the agricultural data of India. 1800 to 1860, for example, 1800 to 1860, area under food crops it grown only 7%, and area under commercial crop it grown 43%. So massive development in area under commercial crop. Massive development in area under commercial crop. So peasants were more inclined to grow the commercial crop rather than food crop. So now the causes of the commercialization of agriculture. Causes. First is Industrial Revolution of England. You understand the Industrial Revolution of England was mostly the textile revolution. 80% industries was there for the textile only. So textile industry had its own demand, raw material, cotton, jute, indigo, all these things are there. because cotton is the prime raw material and indigo was the only coloring agent. There was no artificial color. So the only indigo was used to make it deep blue, navy blue, baby blue, sky blue, what type of the blues you needed. Indigo can only work. So whole world was blue. So, and thereafter packing, jute required, war, jute required. If pigeons will tie, labor will tired, then will take tea. So many commercial crops had got good momentum at this phase. This we call as a commercialization of agriculture. So industrial revolution of England, 80% of the industries was textile industry. So demand of the textile industry had increased. Demand of textile industry had increased. %, industry had textile industry, so demand had increased. Second, American Civil War. So what is this American Civil War? Try to understand that what is this American Civil War. American Civil War, this is America. So northern part of America was capitalist America, industrialist America, but here there was a plantation of the cotton and slaves were employed in the plantation of cotton. So slavery was indispensable part of the economy. Slavery was indispensable part of the economy. Slavery was indispensable part of the economy. So slaves, they don't want to leave the plantation, but slavery was declared sin. So once the name of the slavery was taken to abolish the slavery, so American Civil War had started. So northern American states and southern American states had started fighting. So because of the American Civil War, there was no export of cotton. Cotton was not moving out because of the American Civil War. There was a huge demand of the cotton. There was huge demand of the cotton in the world, and therefore British smelled the demand and pushed India into the cotton cultivation. British smelled the demand and pushed India for cotton cultivation. So American Civil War, because of American Civil War, there was a huge demand of the cotton in the world, and British pushed India for cotton cultivation. Third point. Geographical condition of Deccan. Geographical condition of Deccan. Geographical condition of Deccan means Deccan had a metallic soil, black soil, black metallic soil. You know, soil look black because of the two reasons. The first is that it is a content of the metal. If there is a metallic content, then soil will look good. And if there is a humus content, then soil is look. So when there is a humus rich soil, black soil, this is good for the wheat cultivation. But when there is a metallic soil, that is good for the cotton cultivation. So black soil, whether it is a metallic or whether it is a humus. So metallic soil is always suited for cotton cultivation. So in Deccan also there is a black metallic soil. The metal is titanium. Because of the presence of titanium, it looks black. So it is ideal for the cotton cultivation. It is ideal for cotton cultivation. It is ideal for cotton cultivation. Third. Fourth, introduction of railways. Introduction of railways. Railways. Railway had created easy transportation of the commercial crop from one place to another. Easy transportation of commercial crop from one step to another. So therefore, peasants can sell the cotton without any trouble. Peasants can sell the cotton without any trouble. Railways. Fifth is availability of cheap labor. Cheap labor. Cotton cultivation is a labor-intensive process. Cotton cultivation is a labor-intensive process. So, availability of cheap labor, created atmosphere for the plantation of cotton. Created atmosphere for the plantation of cotton. Created atmosphere the plantation of cotton. So, availability of cheap labor. Look, there are two types of cultivators in Deccan. One was the British. British themselves started cultivation like a plantation economy in America. Means they hired large agricultural land, they employed the peasants, and they started cultivation. Second type of cultivation was that individual peasants, individual peasants having very small amount of land, but large part of it started cultivation of cotton. Large part of it started cultivation of cotton. So that is how there was a cotton boom in Deccan. Everywhere you can see the cotton, cotton and cotton, because only cotton was preferred crops. Because the factors we know that this is the reason why the cotton was a preferred crops. So cotton boom in Deccan. Individual peasants even also able to sell the cotton with the help of middlemen. I told you railway had created and facilitated a good atmosphere for the cotton cultivation and transaction of the commercial crop from a village to the port and port to England. Village to the port and port to England. Second, so you can write the nature and problem of the commercialization of agriculture. Nature and problem of commercialization of agriculture. In Deccan, there were two types of cultivation. There are two types of cultivation. One, first, that is exercised by British planters. British planters. One exercise by British planters. Second, individual peasants. Having small land, but a large part of it was used for cotton cultivation. Large part of it for cotton cultivation. So there was cotton boom in Deccan. Cotton boom in Deccan. Cotton boom in Deccan. Cotton boom in Deccan. The problem was investment and the land revenue. Investment. Look, cotton cultivation is a money intensive process. There was no organized banking system. The system was relying on private money lenders, cultivators, so there was no investment system. So private money lenders was there, They charge very high rate of interest. Terms and conditions of the loan was very high. So investment. Secondly, British government also increased the rate of land revenue. Increased the rate of land revenue. So investment and land revenue, these two. Investment and land revenue, these two was very high. Investment. There was no organized banking system. So peasants had to borrow money from private money lenders. There was no organized banking system. So peasants had to borrow money from private money lenders. Rate was very high. Private money lenders. So rate was very high. British government second. The British government also increased the rate of land revenue because land was used for commercial cropping. Because land was used for commercial cropping. Despite all this problem, it was beneficial. Despite all this problem, it was beneficial. But the real problem had started when American Civil War ended. American Civil War ended. Once the American Civil War ended, American cotton was superior cotton. It forced Indian cotton out of market. Out of market. So demand of the Indian cotton decreased. The prices fall sharply. So once the prices fall sharply, that means the peasant will fall in the vicious cycle of debt, and they had to sell the land in order to pay the dues, and therefore large-scale depeasantization. So that resulted in ultimately Deccan Revolt. So this is the way that you can see the commercialization of agriculture had disastrous impact on the economic system. So American Civil War ended. So look at the condition. What I said, after American Civil War ended, American cotton started coming to international market. American cotton started coming to international market. American cotton started coming to international market. There was huge demand of cotton in the world. There was huge demand of cotton in the world, but now the demand of Indian cotton had decreased because the American cotton was superior cotton. Prices of the Indian cotton also decreased. prices of Indian cotton also decreased. Prices of the Indian cotton also decreased. So peasant fell in vicious cycle of debt. Peasants fell in vicious cycle of debt. Vicious cycle of debt. They had to sell the land in order to pay the dues. They had to sell the land in order to pay the dues. And very soon the peasant turned into agricultural labor. Turned into agricultural labor. Peasants turn into agricultural labor. Peasants turn into agricultural labor. So ultimately there was Deccan Revolt of 1875. Deccan Revolt of 1875. This Deccan Revolt, it lasted for 4 years around. And 1879, the British government passed Deccan Agriculturist Relief Act. Deccan Agriculturist Relief Act. Relief Act. And increased rate of land revenue was taken back. Increased rate of land revenue was taken back. Increased rate of land revenue was taken back. So Deccan Agriculturist Relief Act. Increased rate of land revenue was taken back. So even the commercialization of agriculture had a disastrous impact on Indian economy. Third is destruction of handicraft industries. Destruction of handicraft industries. Agriculture and industry. Give the heading destruction of handicraft industries. Destruction of handicraft industries. Agriculture and industry was the two main bases of Indian economy. Two main bases of Indian economy. Agriculture and industry were the two main bases of Indian economy. Two main bases of Indian economy. But by the end of the 19th century, agriculture declined. By the end of the 19th century, agricultural declined. Handicraft declined, and agriculture remained as the main form of the economy. By the end of the 19th century, handicraft declined and agriculture remained the only form of economy. Handicraft declined and agriculture remained the only form of economy. So 19th century. So destruction of handicraft industries. Let us analyze the causes for the destruction of handicraft industries. I told you that in the 19th century, agriculture and handicraft were the two main bases of Indian economy. But by the end of the 19th century, handicraft declined and then agriculture remained the only source of economy. Agriculture remained the main source of economy. The causes of the decline of handicraft industries. Look at the causes. Causes of the decline of handicraft industries. First is Industrial Revolution of England. Industrial Revolution of England. Industrial Revolution was mainly shift from man to machine. Shift from man to machine. Machine-made goods was qualitatively superior. Machine-made goods was qualitatively superior and cost-effective. Qualitatively superior and cost-effective. Machine-made goods was qualitatively superior and cost-effective. Therefore, the demand of Indian handicraft decreased. Demand of Indian handicraft decreased. Second point. Tariff policy of the British. Second point, tariff policy. Tariff policy of the British. Tariff policy means export-import policies. Export-import policies. Export-import policies. Tariff policy of the British, export-import policies. The export and import policies was fixed in such a way that it promoted British export in India, and it discouraged Indian export. Indian goods not only became costlier, in international market, but in domestic market as well. Indian goods not only became costlier in international market, but in domestic market as well. Domestic market as well. Third factor. Third factor is very easy to understand, the British expansionist policy. So British expansionist policy means Indian Raja, Nawab and Jamindar, they were the biggest patron of Indian artisans. Means they have their own industry, so they employ them. So biggest patron of Indian artisans. But because of the expansionist policy, Raja Nawab lost their state. So artisans also lost the patronage. The result was that these Raja Nawab, they stopped giving patronage to the artisans, and therefore lack of patronage means discouragement. And artisans had no option but to go on agriculture, and agriculture was already overflooded. So therefore they won't become peasant, they will turn out to be agricultural labor. So British expansionist policies. Indian Raja Nawab were the biggest patron of Indian artisans. Biggest patron of Indian artisans. They employ them in their own industry. They employ them in their own industry. Employ them in their own industry. But due to expansionist policy, Raja Nawab and Jamindar lost their state. Raja Nawab and Jamindar lost their state. So it greatly discourages, because artisans lost the patronage. Artisans lost the patronage. Therefore, artisans migrated to agriculture. Where they transformed into agricultural labor. They transformed into agricultural labor. Fourth. Then fourth factor, So fourth factor, it is related to the Indian social system. So Indian social system, there is a huge gap between the intelligentsia and the working class. You know, high caste people, they are intelligentsia, and the low caste people, they are the working class. They are the main producer. But all the informations, technology, technical input, all received by intelligentsia. Because of the caste gap, it was not shared to the production classes. So production classes always had a primitive technology. Because of the caste immobility or the social immobility, whatever the information received by intelligentsia, it was not shared to the production classes, because production classes is a lower caste. And the caste complexities you understand in India. So because of these complications, the product always remained primitive because of the primitive methods was used. So compared to the British Industrial Revolution, it had altogether lost the relevance. Next is the social contradictions in India. Social contradictions in India. In Indian society, upper caste is called intelligentsia. Upper caste is called intelligentsia. And it was not shared. Upper caste is called intelligentsia, and intelligentsia do not share the technological advancement with the lower caste or the production classes. Intelligentsia do not share the technical advancement with the production classes. Therefore, mode of production remained primitive and product became irrelevant. Mode of production remained primitive and the product became irrelevant. Fifth is Dadani system. Dadani system. What is this Dadani system? Look, Dadani system, actually British was simply purchaser. They purchase good things from India. They sell all over the world. Now British decided to turn into production houses. So they employed large number of artisans in that production houses. British paid advance money to them. So British paid advance money to them. But they were forced to sign the document called Patta and Kabuliyat. Patta is the title deed and Kabuliyat is a letter of acceptance. Letter of acceptance. So Patta and Kabuliyat. But terms was so harsh that artisans were forced to cultivate on very harsh term, and therefore they got discouraged. So Dadani system, it was introduced by Britishers. Dadani system was introduced by Britishers. Introduced by Britishers. In Dadani system, artisans were hired by the British company. Artisans were hired by British company on payment of some advance. On payment of some advance. On payment of some advance. The artisans were managed by local middlemen called gumastas. Artisans were managed by local middlemen called gumastas. Gumastas. Artisans were forced to sign the document known as Patta and Kabuliyat. Patta and Kabuliyat. Patta is a title deed. And Kabuliyat is letter of acceptance. Letter of acceptance. Title deed and letter of acceptance. Patta and Kabuliyat. Letter of acceptance. British was forced to sign the deal, Patta and Kabuliyat. Once you read the Patta and sign the letter, that means you accepted the terms and conditions. The terms and condition was very harsh. Terms and condition was very harsh. Therefore, artisans discouraged and they left artisanal mode of production. And migrated to agriculture. Artisans was very much discouraged. They left artisanal mode of production and migrated to agriculture. So these are the things related to the destruction of handicraft industries, but till date British not agree that we have destroyed the handicraft. According to, you can continue here, according to Maurice D. Morris, deindustrialization is a myth. Deindustrialization is a myth. Deindustrialization is a myth, means the British did not had a policy to discourage the handicraft or that resulted in deindustrialization. Actually, the intention of the British was to create maximum industrialization, heavy industries. And whenever the heavy industries developed, normally small scale industries do not survive. And this is the reason why handicraft declined. So according to Maurice D. Morris, a British economist, he said deindustrialization is a myth. Because in second half of 19th century, British started developing heavy industries. Therefore, handicraft did not sustain, did not survive. handicraft did not survive. But Maurice de Maurice failed to explain about the declining export of India. If it was only deindustrialization, declining export of India, if it was only deindustrialization, then export pattern of India should not decrease. Export pattern of India should not decrease. In 1757, demand of handicraft was around 50% of the total demand of the world. 50% of the total demand of the world. Demand of handicraft was around 50% of the total demand of the world. But in 1947, it had reduced to 1%. 1947, it had reduced to 1%. So Maurice de Maurice failed to explain this, that why there is sharp decline in export pattern of India related to consumer goods. Sharp decline in export pattern of India related to consumer goods. And then lastly, we can see that here the two important aspects of the growth of agricultural labor and rural indebtedness. We call this as a development of underdevelopment. So let's talk about the development of underdevelopment combinedly. Development of underdevelopment combinedly. The factors that led to the development of underdevelopment: first factor, that is land revenue system of India. Land revenue system of India. After grant of Diwani, many administrative experiment was made by the British to collect the land revenue. Many administrative experiment was made by the British to collect the land revenue, like permanent settlement, Mahalbari settlement, and Rayatbari settlement. Rayatbari settlement. Permanent settlement, Mahalbari settlement, and Rayatbari settlement. In these settlements, rate of land revenue sometimes exceed to 50%. Exceed to 50%. Rate of land revenue sometimes exceeds to 50%. So ultimately it had aided in poverty, famine, disease and revolt. Disease and revolt. Revolt. Permanent settlement. Second was absence of organized banking system. Absence of organized banking system. Absence of organized banking system. Banking system was very difficult and it was in the hands of private money lenders. It was in the hands of private money lenders. Private money lenders. They charge very high rate of interest. High rate of interest. And they force peasant to sell the land. So organized banking system. So there was, they forced peasant to sell the land. And peasant in their own land became landless labor. Peasant in their own land became landless labor. Landless labor. Third point. Destruction of handicraft, that is loss of employment opportunities. Destruction of handicraft, that is loss of employment opportunities. Loss of employment opportunities. Handicraft was the second largest source of employment. Second largest source of employment. After decline of handicraft, there was no other alternative source of employment. No other alternative source of employment. So artisans have no option but to fall on agriculture. Have no option but to fall on agriculture. There they could not become peasant, they will become agricultural labor. Artisans had no option but to fall on agriculture. There they could not become peasant, they will become agricultural labor. Fourth, India's custom, traditions, festivals was very costly. And the peasants had to borrow money from the moneylenders to meet the requirement of market and the society. To meet the requirement of market and society. So very soon they fell in trap of debt. Very soon they fell in trap of debt. They fell in trap of debt. And that resulted in large-scale depeasantization. That resulted in large-scale depeasantization. Fifth is impact of industrialization on family system. Impact of industrialization in family system. Impact on industrialization on family system. There was joint family. And there was a joint big agricultural farm. Joint family and joint big agricultural farm. Due to impact of modernization and industrialization, family system disintegrated. Led to the disintegration of land. So big agricultural farm transformed into a small land. Big agricultural farm transform into small land. Big agricultural farm transformed into small land. So it had decreased the agricultural productivity. 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 Agricultural productivity. So ultimately it affected the economy of village. Ultimately it affected the economy of village. So this led to the beginning of development of underdevelopment. Village becoming more poor. Day by day, village became more poor. Development of underdevelopment. So these are the dimensions of the economic aspects of the British rule. These are the direct impact you can see, economic impact of the British rule in India. Economic impact of British rule in India. Growth of agricultural labor and rural indebtedness. So every year you can have question from this segment. This was an essay type question. So little fact but more analysis. You can use the little fact and more analysis. But ultimately it will prove that how disastrously that Indian agricultural things had lost. Which fourth point? Fourth point means what? That is the last thing that I was discussing. That is India's culture, not culture, India's tradition, festival, ceremonies. So India's tradition, festival, ceremonies is very costly. And all the festivals, dowry system, marriage, community feasting, so very costly. And there was no organized banking system, so peasant had to borrow money from the private money lenders. And next is that the family system means there is a joint family. Joint family means 3-4 generations living together. So joint family means joint land. And the joint land, so that is a big agricultural farm. So agricultural productivity of the big agricultural farm is very high compared to the small land holding. So because of the impact of industrialization and modernization, family system broken. And the family system broken means land also broken. So therefore the land system, it had actually resulted in small land holding. So small land holding, you cannot exercise the scientific cultivation. So obviously the productivity decrease. So if agricultural productivity decrease, that means what? The ultimate impact on the rural economy. If agricultural productivity decrease, that means it is ultimate impact on the rural economy. This is how you explain the development of underdevelopment. So impact of the British economic policies. In the next phase, we will do, I will let you know that the stages of colonialism, and thereafter we will finish this topic to move into the socio-religious reform movement, and then we'll go to the revolt of 1857. So stages of colonialism. There are 3 stages of colonialism. You can look here. The first stage is the 1757 to 1813. Second stage 1813 to 1860, and third stage is called 1860 to 1947. Here we have mercantilism. Here we have free trade. And here we have finance capitalism. So 3 stages of colonialism. Mercantilism, free trade, and finance capitalism. So we will take a break to start here, these 3, and then we'll see you after the break.